Let's do it. I guess we can start. Welcome to the special episode of The Right Play. I'm Blake Wright, and I am with Michael Feifer, the most prolific director I have ever worked with, had the honor of working with. This is a little bit of promo material right here for him. Mike, how you doing, man? It's good to see you.
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I was really honored to be a part of this production and work with you. What you've learned across your extensive career, the highs and lows that come with filmmaking, what it takes to have such a long career and have an opportunity to do over 100 films.
I've produced something like 130, and I've directed 80 movies.
Yeah.
And I've written about 50, 60 screenplays.
What's the key to put out so much output?
The key is having to feed your family. And I'm being totally serious.
No, I believe it, yeah.
If this is what you want to do for a living, you got to hustle and find a way to make money to do it for a living. So for me, it's just what I do. And it all started because my dad made movies.
Yeah.
So I started working for my father in my 20s. But if my father was a plumber, I'd probably be a plumber. He just happened to make movies. But I guess to go back in time, in 1972, we lived in New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So my father was director of television research, and they shut down the New York operation, and they moved us to Los Angeles. But I had no interest in making movies. I didn't know anything about movies. I was a kid, right? But my parents divorced.
Okay.
Probably the worst thing to happen in my career. And we moved to a town called Tarzana, which is in the San Fernando Valley.
Yep.
Right? So I grew up there, and the house we moved into there, we actually moved across the street from the editor of Variety, which is,
huge magazine.
Hollywood Reporter, Variety, now Deadline, big trades. So his name was Tom Pryor. Moved across the street. Still had no interest in making movies, but you see how you live in L.A. and all these connections and everything.
So adjacent to all these different sorts of
yeah.
factors.
And meanwhile, my dad had an office on the Fox lot. So when I was a kid, I used to go to the Fox lot. And then that all ended for my dad. He worked for Carol Burnett, who's a famous comedian.
The Carol Burnett show. Yeah.
A lot of people know, but young people don't know her anymore. But she's still alive. She's still funny, and you still see her sometimes. That ended, and my dad started making low-budget movies. So I had no interest in making movies. When I grew up, and this is important, I think, for filmmakers, is I grew up drawing. I grew up sculpting. My dad bought me a Sheikah FR 35mm SLR camera in the 7th grade. And in the 7th grade, I taught myself f-stops and shutter speeds and ASA back then. Now they call it ISO. And lenses. I knew back then I had a 50 and a 35 and a 85 and all that. And I think it's really important at a young age to get that equipment. But there was no intention of anything making movies. It was just my brother and I loved doing art, But I was a kid who just ran around and climbed trees. But we would do all that kind of art stuff too. And then I had a drafting class in 12th grade. It was the only class in the history of my entire education that I was like way, way beyond everybody else. Yeah. Like my drawings, I was like 30 drawings ahead of everybody. So my brother goes to school for architecture, for what we call environmental design at Berkeley, and I ended up following his steps, and I went to Boulder. So I went to University of Colorado Boulder for architecture, but that was an amazing education for filmmaking.
I can imagine, yeah. I mean, with all the skills that... So my dad had a construction company growing up. So, I mean, it's kind of funny that you say, like, my dad was a, construction guy. I would have been I'm the oldest child.
Did you go into construction?
For
a little bit.
I worked with him for, I don't know. I mean, since I was 11 years old in the summers. And then when I was in college, all those summers, and then 2 years before I had a degree in theater. But I can relate to you. Like, I can relate to that sort of like, do I do this?
Right.
This is what Dad does and everything, kind of that way. And I was also the kid that was like doing all that stuff, playing pretend. But I go back to what I was saying, like in construction, we're looking at a lot of plans, a lot of these technical drawings and, landscape architecture and drawings and having to decipher it. And ultimately, we're the ones that were creating and manifesting it, bringing it to the physical world.
Right.
And I could see like how that connection with your education goes into it.
Well, you learn design process.
Yeah.
So in architecture school, you learn color, composition, perspective. These are all things that relate to filmmaking, mostly as a director.
Yeah.
And then you learn design process, which is a lot what you're talking about. A building needs bathrooms, a building needs hallways, a building needs, a conference room. So you have to evaluate all those things. So it's the same thing with a movie.
Yep.
When you break down a movie script, you have to have certain locations, you have to have certain crew, you have to have, and so when you kind of have that mindset of that process, it helps a lot. I think they don't teach that enough in film school, but you learn it in architecture school. In film school, they don't really teach you the art of filmmaking, I believe. I've taught at some film schools, and I took some film classes when I was in college. But that education, architecture, in fact, the very first shot of the first movie I directed, which was this really complicated Steadicam shot for a movie called Lethal Eviction, and I called my father up. I said, architecture school wasn't a waste of time. It's like it all came together. I'm like, wow, it all made sense. So I think that was really valuable, that education for filmmaking. But anyways, I went to architecture school. I graduated a degree in architecture, and I worked at a design firm for a year. And I was trying to decide where I'm going to go for my master's. And my dad was making this dumb movie called Fraternity Demon. And
that sounds like a hit.
You could search it on the internet and
cult
find
classic.
And my brother was in between Berkeley and Harvard, and I was trying to decide what to do. And we went and worked on it, and everything was just falling apart. And my brother and I never worked on a movie before, but we were kind of the glue to hold the movie together.
Yeah.
My brother went off to Harvard, and I just started working for my dad. So the next movie, I was the assistant to producers. And then the next one, I said, let me be the production coordinator so that everything runs through me. And I learned a lot. And then at 24, I think I produced my first movie. And my dad's like, you can't do it alone. You have to have a friend do it. So a friend named Drew produced that movie with me. That was called Witchcraft 5.
Okay.
I then produced Witchcraft 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
So there was a franchise that you came into.
My dad had this franchise of movies.
Gotcha.
There's no witchcraft really, and they're just silly horror films. But that's how I learned to make movies in the 90s.
That's interesting.
Just back then with the VHS days and then the DVD days, we were just pumping out all these crazy, ridiculous movies. And so that's how I learned to make movies. So just making movies with my dad, and then I ran his video label. I would go with him to all the foreign markets and sell movies.
So you had distribution inside of your father's company at the time?
Well, my father...
or a component of it, rather.
My father had 2 or 3 companies rip him off on the distribution side.
Okay.
So that's a whole conversation we can have about distribution, which is vitally important because it's a real mess, actually. It's a very difficult aspect of film production. You can make a movie and then nobody sees it because you don't understand distribution. And you don't understand how to make your movie because remember, it's the movie business, you know? So it's not art. You're making something for an audience, which is what I call commercial design. Commercial design to me is the greatest form of art. A Porsche, an iPhone, the greatest commercial designer, filmmaker, it's got to be probably Spielberg, you know? So you're designing something for an audience. You know, Picasso, or I like to think like Jackson Pollock. Well, Jackson Pollock didn't even get famous until after he passed away, but like a Picasso just paints something, he likes it. He doesn't care if everybody else likes it or not.
True, yeah.
But when you make a movie, you have to make something that the audience likes. And that, to me, is a more interesting form of art.
Well,
and it's an art form.
Yeah, it gives you more, you know, it gives you a challenge in a way that, you know, because I make music for fun. And a lot of it is never going to be, you know, heard by a bunch of people. But when you're making a film, you want to share it with the audience. That's an integral part of, you know, the movie experience. You know, at least watching it with somebody else if you're not in a theater.
Right. Well, you also have to follow certain rules of filmmaking to have people digest it and understand it and feel a part of it and connect with it. I mean, one of the basic things that film students learn is crossing the line, you know, the line of action, right? If you don't follow certain rules, your movie won't cut together, and then it's not going to be pleasing to the eye for the audience. So then you're not making it for the audience, you're making it for yourself, you know? And or you just don't know how to make movies.
Yeah, it takes you out of it, you know, and that's
but it does take you out of it, right? All right. So just do it.
Just do it. Put yourself out there. If you're a creative, you got the technology. Students have the skills. Now develop the mindset. This has been Blake Wright and Michael Feifer, and we're wishing you all a good night. Thank you for tuning in.